Even if it comes in on the higher end of its tracking, its opening would still be lower than The Marvels, another female-fronted superhero movie that opened with 46.1 million. So it's not looking good for Madam Web.
You know, there's two of the guys who wrote because there's 4 screenwriters for Madam Web, and 2 of them are the screenwriters for Morbius. They're like anti-geniuses. I don't know what it is, but they're like anti-geniuses. They have something. They infuse something into a script that is just so memeable.
Yeah, it's because this is Sony's like take on the superhero universe, isn't it? They're trying to get their Venomverse off the ground, and it's so weird because, like, on the one hand, you've got the MCU, which was massive, and now it's fallen off a cliff and just like imploded. You've got the DCU, which never really got off the ground, and then just shit its pants and passed out on the ground in a pool of its own vomit. And then in between them, you've got this tiny little like Sony Venomverse, which is like trying to draw in characters that it happens to have the rights to for these little movies that go nowhere. And oh, God bless them. Like, I love them for trying, but wow, they've released some turds, man.
Morbius was released twice.
Yes, it was.
Flopped twice. Speaking of movie that bombed twice.
That was when the studio saw the meme campaign and actually thought it was genuine fan enthusiasm and thought, we'll re-release it.
So embarrassing. Yeah, and then Venom does suspiciously well a lot. It's just like they're on their 3rd one coming up now, right?
Yeah. Oh, is there a 3rd Venom movie coming out?
Yeah, they just make loads of money.
I've seen both of them in the cinema, and I could not tell you a single thing about either of them. Tom Hardy's have got everything.
I remember one scene where he eats a piece of pizza out of a garbage can, and that's literally the only thing I can remember. They're hideously ugly. They've got these. A lot of the big battle scenes take place at night, and Venom is black, and usually his opponents are also very dark colored. So you literally can't see what's happening. It's a hideous movie.
Drinker, if all I can say about Venom 2 is that it stars Tom Hardy and it's directed by Andy Serkis, so the equivalent of a Chris Stuckman review, then yes, it must have left you.
It's not that bad. It's not Chris Stuckman review level.
Don't want to segue into some totally irrelevant discussion about your childhood, about how you used to go to the movie theaters and you used to like Venom.
Did the movie make you think deeply about anything, or was it just...
Venom is a character that I know not much about. Thank you.
I watched this movie I came really close to having an opinion, and then I thought, I shouldn't do it.
No, not today. I suppressed those feelings.
You know how they talk about chaotic neutrals in terms of human psychology and so on? Like, what is Chris Stuckman's version of that? He's like a neutral? A placid neutral. Like, it's age. I don't have any opinions about anything, really.
So nice that they made a film.
Thank you. But yeah, Madam Web, I feel like I say this about a lot of superhero movies now, especially from DC, but it feels like a movie that belonged to a very different era of filmmaking. It feels like a film that they should have released 5-6 years ago, and it might have done okay. People might actually have cared. They are so over these kinds of films now, and the fact that it's coming out at this time of year.
We might also be getting to the point where it's going to do more damage in the long run than it will give anybody any benefit, because there was a time throughout maybe 2008 through 2015, 16, 2019 when it was sort of ingrained in the audience's mind that you go and see these films because they are all in some sense connected. You're not in the habit of missing them during the high days of Marvel. The more of them that come out, even if they're not MCU properties, superhero films in general, the more of them that come out that you just think, nah, not for me, or no, I can't be bothered, or it doesn't matter because it's not going anywhere. I think the more it gets set in the audience's mind that these things are not sort of these marquee events anymore, you don't need to go and see all the superhero films. And so when the next big one comes out, more people will be minded to say, probably not going to go see that one actually, because they're used to dropping out of these stories.
Is this really Slim Dice? I don't
fact about Madam Web while I was researching it. Did you know that this is a period movie? It's set in 2003.
2003.
What?
Exactly. What?
I heard about that. It's got something to do with they were going to try and tie it in with particular Spider-Man, right?
Something like it ended up in 2003 by accident. They were going to do it in the 90s, I think, to tie it in with a different, maybe a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah,
And
which doesn't make any
then
fucking sense.
Wait, so
But they
Yeah,
did
so-
reshoots, but the only way they could do the reshoots cheaply, but was to make it look like 2003. They couldn't get it to look like modern day. I'm not sure. It's a bit of a convoluted mess, but it makes it even
are they going to try and tie it in with the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy?
What I heard, the intention was to tie it to Andrew Garfield, but then they'd set it in a timeline that's earlier even than Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, so they couldn't use any of them. So there's like a huge fuck up. That's what I was told anyway. And then they had to change it. They like made a mistake on the timelines. I don't know. Like I've had people tell me this, and I was just like, "You fucking kidding me? How does this even happen? They fuck up this badly."
It's the perfect shot. I mean, is there anything that? I mean, getting away from the memes, is there anything that actually recommends the movie commercially? Is there any reason audiences would show up to this?
No, this like Madam Web. No one's heard of her. No one cares. No one's into superhero movies, so like they're not going to be even motivated to learn about the character. So I don't think there's anything.
There's no actors or actresses that are going to draw audiences.
Not really. No.
It's not a
the fact that the fact that it's getting released at this time of year, this is the dumping ground for shit movies that the studios know that nobody wants. So, yeah. January, February,
You just like ended the whole conversation with that statement.
I mean, at least they know that it's a flop. At least they know it's a flop.
Yeah.
I think so,
It's such an interesting film that there is absolutely nothing to say.
That's so normal at this point. It's like, what is that? Is that a surprise? Like, no.
I don't think I've seen the trailer for it. I don't care. I mean, I'm going to have to see it because I'll probably end up covering it, but I know nothing about the character. I've not seen the trailer. I don't know anything about it, and I fully expect to have forgotten it within 2 weeks of it coming out like Echo. But, yeah, if they know it's a flop, though, surely they'll take a lesson from that and stop doing it. And yet they keep doing it.
I mean, they probably will to some extent take a lesson from it. Like Mom said, the Venom movies, I think, make money somehow. They are somehow successful, even though nobody remembers them and nobody knows what the hell the point of them is.
They got it in their head like a lot of people do. It's just like, so we can make anything and makes money. It's like, do you not have a team that can tell you how this works? Like, Venom and its vague connections to a multiverse are enough to drag it through, but like, I wouldn't even expect necessarily that it's something that go for any more than 2 films. I have no idea. I don't know how long Tom Hardy's going to be an asset for you. Like, who knows?
Would Venom make money if they make a third Venom? Surely it's going to flop. I mean, look what happened to Aquaman 2. Aquaman 2 is a flop, and Aquaman 1 made $1 million.
If they threw in a Spider-Man, like, it gets complicated in terms of how much attention it can get. Spider-Man's pretty audience-drawing at this point. At least he's the biggest audience draw for all the superhero characters right now.
It would need to be Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, I think, in order for it to be a genuine success.
I don't know why anyone has got it in their head that Tom Holland is less of a draw than Andrew Garfield.
No, I don't think they'll. Can they use Tom Holland? Because I know the
Sony
rights, the copyrights are a bit confused. So
as far as I know, that's the plan that they're fighting right now. I saw some article or tweet about whether or not they're going to make Spider-Man 4 story grounded or, spectacle-ish. Like, that's what Sony and Kevin Feige are fighting over.
Yeah, I saw the article too. They want all 3 Spider-Man in Spider-Man 4. So
that was a one-shot deal. That really feels like the kind of thing they should have done once, and it was a nice gimmick. It was cool to see them all together.
So they want money.
Yeah.
And the bean counter said, if you do more multiverse stuff, maybe more money. I don't know why they keep saying this. Somebody needs to stop them. Who's the guy that keeps telling them this?
Well, it's I talked about this just recently. the problem with multiverses is that you have to keep them very contained before they spill over into everything and destroy everything that you've created. You know, make it a very brief window into different realities if you really have to do it. That's why No Way Home worked so well. It was just confined to the Spider-Man universe. It wasn't the fate of all reality or anything that was at stake. And it was a neat little concept, and it was wrapped up in a really good character-driven drama. That's what made it work. You try to exploit that even more, you're just going to go down the same road that you've always gone down with the multiverse stuff, like with Multiverse of Madness. You end up with garbage because you're trying to incorporate way too much stuff, way too many stakes into what should be a self-contained story.
It's also hard to see how you could even repeat the No Way Home trick without just effectively replaying large plot beats. I mean, one of the other things I think made No Way Home such a draw and such a success is that, yeah, you're right, the multiverse works because it's a momentary intrusion that is resolved by the close of the film. But during that momentary intrusion, you got effectively the character resolutions for the other previous two Spider-Man and all of the main and important villains. So you've pretty much run through your major plot beats that you could use some sort of crossover with. I'm struggling to think, doing something like that again, how you would build on that in a way that's not just, oh, look, Dr. Octopus is back again, or the Spider-Man are back again. But yeah, is there any new ground to be plumbed with that, or was that just a one-off?
It's been strip mined. Both those trilogies have been strip mined. They've been thoroughly plundered. There's nothing else you could really put on screen that only care about from any those 6 movies with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire.
What do you think?
I think so. I think they've been thoroughly plundered. I mean, all the best villains were there. The two main Spider-Man
Well, yeah,
were there.
but we progress them, right? Like you put Spider-Man. I'm not saying they would do this; they should. We've had a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 4. We would just give him a new villain, his own vision. It could fucking be the Mysterio they were going to run, or their own Vulture that they were going to run. Right? You can do anything you want, really.
I understood that they were interested in doing more Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies because he was up for doing it. He was still young enough to play the character, and they were interested in starting his movies up again. But it's nothing's really come of that, like independently.
Why not do 3? All been talked about. It's in a weird position right now. I think because there's so many choices you can make, but you've got to commit to one. And as soon as you do, it knocks out the rest, basically. Like you wouldn't want to make a Andrew Garfield sequel, Tobey Maguire sequel, and Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland in focus. And if you do, then that cancels out the other ones.
And you got Spider-Verse as well.
Yep. Well, the thing
I know
is,
it's not connected, but
you
it's
got fucking Madam Web too.
But if you do Tom Holland, then you have to share like 25% of your revenue with Marvel. Whereas if you got Andrew Garfield, as far as I understand it, then he's yours, and you can just make 100% of the profits. Tobey Maguire, like, you know, I love him and stuff, but like he's probably too old now, and he's done his trilogy. He got like his effectively his fourth movie. If you do Tom Holland, you have to share like 25% of your revenue. He doesn't need to do any. Whereas if you got less incentive for him to do it. Whereas Andrew Garfield, I think, is more of a viable prospect.
Yeah, Gary would beat you up because they lost.
I'm just saying, like, you know, you almost have to look at it from the point of view of like tarnishing your own legacy. And I think Maguire, like, rest easy and say, like, you know, I had two good movies and one, and then like a fourth one that just really brought everything back. So like 4 films that I've done.
All slightly enjoyed Maguire.
Yeah, but you didn't
Like,
start
shit, and
Flash
then-
with Michael Keaton in it just because you can bring back this old guy.
Yeah,
Okay, but No Way Home
that's my point.
historically considered to be one of the only things that were worthwhile in phases 4 and 5 put together. So
I guess the point I'm making here is like if you're a studio that wants to set up the idea of bringing back a really like not a really popular Spider-Man, but like a man who like has kind of redeemed himself now and is you know is a good prospect and is still young enough to play the role for a few more years and is up for doing it. I think Garfield would probably be your better choice. That's all I'm saying. Like from a studio point of view, that's who I would pick.
but like I wonder if they have a bit of reservation about it because of the success of Amazing Spider-Man, and then of course everything's just in flux right now. I don't know. I assume that we're getting delays on everything because they just don't know what the correct decision is.
Quite possibly.
But we're not getting a delay on Madam Web because that's still coming out.
Well, that's a sure thing, Platoon. went with that one.
The weird thing is that it's one of the only superhero movies that's going to come out this year. We've got Madam Web and we got Deadpool 3. And that's it, pretty much.
What a shame.
A very light year for superhero films, and it's exactly what the
Craven as well, apparently.
They're coming out this year, is it?
Yeah, Stuart says don't forget Craven. Possibly.
Don't sleep on Craven, everybody.
I think we all did forget Craven. Yes.
In 5 minutes' time, I've forgotten it again.
Yes.
It's another one of those characters I know nothing about. Same Madam Web and Craven. I know nothing about them. Like I am not a big comic book person, so the success of the MCU was, I think, in large part because they picked all of these very important core casts that even people who weren't very familiar with comics at least partially recognized. And you can bank on that. And once you've got those normal people through the seats, then you can start actually building some sort of cinematic universe. We've gone through all of them. We haven't replaced them with anybody equivalently recognizable. And now we are plumbing the depths of the barrel, scraping the depths of the barrel even. Depths of the barrel, scraping the depths of the barrel even. Madam Web. That's not going to be drawing many more like non-comic book readers, I don't think. I don't think it'll be drawing many comic book readers either. But
Also, as I mentioned earlier, someone actually in chat was saying that Spider-Man's always been the most profitable. That's just how it is. Like, no, the Amazing Spider-Man times it like crashed and they worried about it. Batman at one point took over, but we're now in a position that's really fucking odd of almost all the superhero characters on enough. People wonder if like a Fantastic Four would that do well? It's like I'm not sure anymore. I don't know. The Spider-Man is
Not with Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic. That's for fucking sure.
These two are
the-
that's coming from
and the Matt Reeves like the Batman franchise. If the second one only pulls in like 600 million, that's probably up it. So it needs to, everything is just in a weird place right now. And I'm not sure Spider-Man, even though he's on top, can guarantee do it. It's all a big worry.
it's not guaranteed everything behind the acquisition of the X-Men coming out. Fantastic Four and X-Men are the next sort of very, very big, universally recognized properties that will be in their hands before too long. But maybe before too long is still too long away because the interest would have died completely by the time we even get them.
Does anyone here think that the superhero movies can make a comeback post 2023?
I mean, they don't deserve it right now. You need to fucking shut up and sit down.
I think Deadpool will do okay.
I
think he's done. I think he's quite wasted.
I honestly think what we need is a break for a few years. We need a few years off from superhero movies, and we need a break. We need a break from extended universes. Like, fine, give us a standalone Batman movie or a standalone Spider-Man movie, whatever, or a standalone Superman movie. They'll probably do fine because those characters are so iconic, fucking even movies the way they are. But this idea of we're still going to have these decrepit old extended universes with obscure characters that nobody outside of like comic book fandoms has never heard of, those days are gone. They're not coming back.
I still think you can keep an element of the extended universe, but I think you massively need to contract the scope of that extended universe. I always thought that the natural course of action when the beginning of Phase 4 comes along, what you really need to do is to keep the shared universe, but you need to bring it very much back, literally down to Earth. You need to have all of these people, all of your new characters, principally Spider-Man, Daredevil, the local three-tier heroes you can start to rebuild from the ground up, much as Phase 1 itself did. You can have ways of getting your legacy cast from Phase 3 back into that as well. But then at least you've reset the board in that situation. You can start progressing stories naturally and relatably. What you don't want to do is, effectively, your first entry in Phase 4 is to say, no, right now is an unquantifiable multiverse, and no one knows what's going on anymore, and no one knows where anybody is or who all of these people are. It's a bad way of introducing your new characters because they are just going to be lost in the infinite multiverse in that situation. If you actually introduce people like even someone like Riri Williams in a grounded, Earth-based story, which actually overlaps with recognizable people like Spider-Man, then you might have had a bit more luck with her. But tacking her in randomly to Wakanda, which makes no sense anyway, is not the way to actually rebuild your cast of characters.
Try that a little bit with Blue Beetle. Excuse me. I mean, obviously that was at the end of the DCU. But the Blue Beetle was a small, more not grounded. It's obviously a big, crazy, unrealistic thing, but it's compared to the multiverse stuff. It's more small scale, and it was a financial disaster. I'm not sure that there is even an appetite among audiences for those smaller non-multiverse related movies anymore in the
I think
superhero genre.
they need to build towards something. I think you can have the best of both in that situation. You begin from the ground up, but you still give the impression that there is a grander story towards which everything is leading. And one of the problems with Blue Beetle is that, as you say, it was the tail end of the DCU. We don't even know if the character's going to reappear at any point, and there's no obvious tie-in with the grander story that anybody's invested in. So it's another one of those missable superhero films in a way that I think if you'd begun Phase 4 with a clear sense of direction from the ground up, it might not have had that same dynamic. That said, Marvel's tried some of the local stuff already. Echo was not billed as this grounded, character-based story. It's not what we got, but that's what it was billed as. Same thing with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and to a lesser degree, WandaVision. So it's done these things in isolation, but the grander problem is that because you have this multiverse, none of them are leading into each other. They are not supporting each other. They are all just disappearing into the void. And that makes them even more forgettable than they already were, which is significantly.
Partial mention of the DC universe there. Have you seen people talking about the fact that the final scene in the Snyderverse, DCverse is Patrick Wilson eating a cockroach sandwich?
Yes.
Oh,
That's another thing of mine.
I'd be happy.
Do you know what? It's a perfect metaphor because he gives away a little token of gold. It's a big gold coin, and he gives it away for this shitty, horrible sandwich. And that's kind of like the DC, because I saw a video yesterday. It was a guy who went through the entire DCU, whatever the hell it's called. Basically everything from the first Superman movie up to Aquaman to all the movies they released, and he said, did these things make money? And he did everything. He did box office, he did some merchandising, physical sales, and he basically concluded that ultimately it probably just lost a small amount of money. So for all that effort, he got nothing.
It's over. But hey, you guys remember the Dark Universe? I'll never let them forget that. The Mummy, Frankenstein, and Jekyll and Hyde.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah.
That was going to be a thing, wasn't it? I don't think I've ever seen a cinematic universe die as quickly as that.
They had, who was it? He was going to play Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Russell Crowe. They were going to have him do a Hyde movie, a Jekyll and Hyde movie. That would have been bizarre.
Wasn't that Kurtzman behind the Dark Universe?
I think it might have been actually.
Another one of his victories.
So in enough of these extended universes, but you don't want to kill the Godzilla and Kong extended universe, do you?
I mean that's just pure gold. Like I love that.
I think that for all it's worth.
Could we bring the action movie back? I think it's long overdue.
I think it's very much good.
I mean, the appetite is there because John Wick 4 was very successful. Extraction 2, at one point last year, was the most watched movie in the world. It might have even been the most successful streaming movie of 2023. And those were the two big action movies last year.
Yeah,
Well, I've definitely said this previously. Like when people say, like, "Well, what's going to step in to replace superhero films?" And my guess is either just it's going to be some fairly generic action movies, or it's going to be video game adaptations. It's going to be one of those two things. You're overdue a new craze, and like action movies are not so much a craze because they've always kind of been there, but like potentially they fill a gap. But I think video game adaptations will probably be the next thing.
Bring back comedy.
We can't. We're not like
funny, and no one involved in writing scripts can be funny anyway, even if they were allowed to be. They don't know how to do it. So I think that would be tragic to see them try and bring comedy back. But
at least you're allowed to have action scenes and comedy scenes. Fuck that. There's no way they can make those.
Yeah, pretty much every joke would just be like, "White man, am I right?" Can't laugh. American Fiction made me laugh a bunch. Actually, I'm not sure if it's actually classified as comedy. I guess it partially is, but plenty of drama in it as well. But it's like I said, easy recommendation for especially for what we've been talking about in this stream. There's several examples of just the advantage that gets taken from societal and cultural elements. I've seen some people say that it's not as funny as they were hoping it would be. If you've seen the trailer, it looks like it's going to be a lot more absurdist, but it's actually pretty grounded. The film's plot is almost trying to prove the point of the A-Plots one, which is that we've gone into absurd. The way I would summarize it, for anybody who doesn't know what it's about, if you've seen the Community episode that regards
progressive values being tuned in on themselves. It's like racism. The new racism is not being racist, basically. So you watch the trailer. It's about a guy who is trying to be successful as an author, and he writes a book, and they say like, sorry,
Not Will, is it? It's successful.
no,
Moving on.
some fucking hack named Will Jordan. Yeah, forget about him.
but he writes a book, and his like publisher is telling him that he's got to make it a bit more like black, basically. He's got to have it be a bit more like it's sellable in that range because they need more diversity, like in their sales departments and stuff. And so then he does a book as a joke, and like the primary joke from the trailer, he calls the book My Pathology, but he spells it with an F, pathology. And the whole book is written that way. You get a scene as well that's really good where he's interacting with his own characters as he writes them, and they're like retarded, and there's all this kind of crazy shit, and then the book actually kicks off. Like it starts doing well, and he doesn't know what the fuck is going on anymore because he did it all as a joke. I wouldn't want to say any more than that, but I don't know. It was kind of funny. It was kind of refreshing.
It is. It's probably the funniest movie of the year because there were no comedies. There was that. There was no Hard Feelings by Jennifer Lawrence, which I've seen, unfortunately. It's not awful in but it's pretty crap. But yeah, American Fiction. It's really good satire, and it's a necessary satire because it does satirize that regressive culture whereby you're so progressive that you're actually doing society backward, and you're basically creating, I would call it cultural segregation. Disney do this, for example. I actually heard a rumor that Disney are now not allowing animators to animate characters that are not of their own skin color. Because they do this with voice acting. You're not. If you're a white man,
would not surprise me.
if you're a white man, you can't voice act a black character now, right? Which is absurd, obviously, for lots of reasons. But it is the logical continuation of that policy. So it's that kind of cultural segregation. That's what the movie, I think, is satirizing, and I like that a lot. I mean, obviously, I'm biased in that way. I'm going to approve of the movie because it's politics agree with my own. But at the same time, it succeeds in satire in the way, for example, something like Barbie feels miserably. Like that's it. That's satire.
I feel like the film had a level-headed approach as well. One of the final arguments between two of the characters doesn't have a well, then the correct answer is X. It's more of a they explain the problem and then they're like not sure what the solution is. Basically, that's the film doesn't give you a strong direction. I don't think, but at the same time points out and laughs at a lot of stupid shit.
What did you think of the ending, Muller? Because it's something like it's a weird ending.
I am heavily biased in favor of it. I'll tell you exactly why. I don't know if you guys know, but we covered one of the top streamers of all like engagement ever called XQC, and one of the clips that we covered is he didn't know what condensation was. Fans had to explain it to him. He basically, this is a clip where he says, "I grabbed my can of whatever, I brought it up to my room, and then it was wet." That doesn't make any sense. And his fans told him what condensation was, and by the end of him Googling it, reading it, he said, "So water just appears out of nowhere." Okay. At the end of this film, you already know what I'm going to be talking about.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Me, friggin' Rice, couldn't fucking believe it. There's this airheaded director that the main character's talking to about adapting his story into a film. And as they're like back and forth, some fucking PA comes up to him and hands him his can that he wanted, and he grabs it. And he goes, "Why is this wet?" And the guy goes, "Condensation." Then he goes, "What are you, a fucking weatherman?" He said, as the guy walks away, he goes, "Never again."
Yeah, that was a lovely little moment.
When they did that, I was like, "Holy shit, I love this film." Like, I wonder if they actually got that from the viral clip. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's definitely something to recommend. And also Sterling K. Brown, he's the K brother, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Sterling K. Brown is always pretty reliable.
No
Good
relation.
actor. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the only other thing I was curious about was Rings of Power, which we all loved. It was a real hit when it first came out, but they have wrapped production on season 2, or so they claim, and that was way back in I think September, October of last year. Now we still haven't seen anything even resembling a trailer, and there's no indication of when it's going to come out, and it's fueling rumors that the season has been delayed. They're probably going to make the argument that it was because of the strikes and so on, but it wasn't, because they were able to wrap filming successfully. They got everything that they needed. And the current crop of rumors that are now doing the rounds is that they're actually going to reshoot large portions of this and remake it. The showrunners, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, have apparently been demoted in the interim. Like between seasons 1 and 2, they've been demoted showrunners to like consulting producers, or whatever the ridiculous term is. Yeah, pretty much. And so the question mark that's hanging over this show now is, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to delay it? Are they going to like try and salvage something from this show? Because everything that we're hearing so far just leaves a giant question over what is even going on with it. This is $1 billion show, everyone.
From what I remember, season 1 came out in September of 2022. So I don't know if they are going to effectively just hold it until roughly the same time for each year of release. That might just be the simplest explanation, is that that's the release window they've got down, because that's the one they went with last time, and the market research told them that that would have been the best time to do it. But against that, you can find interviews where they say that they think it's very important that we have as minimal a gap between seasons as possible, so speed is of the essence. And if they've already finished filming, then yeah, waiting till September if you also want to do it doesn't really add up. I don't know. I've not seen very much about this, except that I keep an eye on the analytics for my Rings of Power videos. So when they start ticking up again, because Amazon is spending hundreds of millions of pounds on YouTube advertisements, then I'll know it's coming. It's like feeling water sort of wind.
Yeah. No, I mean, I ask about this because, yeah, there seems to be rumors doing the rounds that this season has been a troubled one. And they kind of recognize the problems that they had with the first season, and they're trying to correct it. Because the backlash that we saw to season 1 was immense, and it was kind of admirable in a lot of ways, because you can't even make the argument really that it was a divisive show. It seems like pretty much everyone thought it was garbage. So it almost united the Lord of the Rings fandom in their condemnation of it.
We covered someone who loved it, apparently, right? Drinker, encompassing their entire praise of the show. They were like, CG, wow, that was great. The CG was so good. Special effects, yes. CG, wow. Yeah, so it's great. We were like, oh, CG. I mean, do you want to talk about the writing? It's like, no.
Because we've had trailers for season 2 of House of the Dragon. Sorry, the name escaped me there. So it just you've essentially got 2 shows that are roughly contemporary with each other, but one seems to have progressed so much better than the other.
And the fraction of the publicity as well. I remember the nice thing about House of the Dragon season 1 is that it didn't come out of completely nowhere. I did see the occasional advertisement for it, say, on the tube in London or on television, but not very much, and I didn't know a huge amount about it. And it didn't seem to have a huge amount of fanfare when it did first launch. And obviously, coming off the back of the disaster of Game of Thrones season 8, had a lot of making up to do. But it made up for it almost immediately, and then spread rapidly through word of mouth, which is always going to be way cheaper than Amazon's marketing budget is. Which seems to be spent principally on trying to take down YouTube videos which are critical of your work. But it was nice to see the counterpoint. Here is a faithful and well-written fantasy adaptation, which had very little by way of support comparatively, and it's just blown up and everyone loves it, versus Rings of Power, which comes out contemporaneously, with loads of money, huge budgets, all the publicity, everything you ever ordered from Amazon has an advert for Rings of Power, and it's fucking shit. And it deserves the failure that it got. So, it kind of all started. If they're sensible, they will take a look at House of the Dragon and try and learn what it was that made that quite as popular as it became. But they're not sensible because they're Amazon.
I can understand that.
I mean,
If you were suddenly put in charge of this show, coming into it with season 2, like after the reception of season 1, what could you potentially do to try and salvage this? Like, I feel like it's an unwinnable situation because the public perception of it is so negative. I don't know how you could redeem yourself in their eyes.
there are two ways you could Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Brown.
I was going to say, main way is to raise the subscription fee by £3 to pay for the series.
I'll do
Yeah,
it.
that'll get
We can do that, yeah.
I think
Because
there's
I'm not short on money.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about it, yeah.
you could do it two ways. You could do it, and I think this is what they have to do because they didn't scrap it and start over, which that option's gone. So they can either do, if they're going to do it well, they would need to do it lore accurate. So you move forward and bearing in mind that the lore has already been trashed, but you kind of try to get it back on track and get it lore accurate, or you just take it off in its own direction and just it's its own thing now. We're not even going to try to keep it accurate to Tolkien's world. It's just its own series, and we're going to write it the way we want to write it. If I was at Amazon, that's the way I would do it, because I think Humpty Dumpty's broken. You're not going to put them back together again. I think that's how it is with lore. So I would just make it its own show completely and write on the basis of what is best.
I find it really struggled with that because season one already effectively did that. Season one has the problem of attempting, well, it claims it sells itself on the basis that it is an adaptation of Tolkien's work, but really it's not. It breaks the law. It does already go off in its own direction, and there is no way of pulling that back, even as season two moves into areas where they have more of the rights to the backstory material. But I sometimes think that that's not as big a deal as people like you and I probably think that it is, because obviously, if you're a fan of Tolkien, lots of people on the internet, lots of YouTubers are big fans. We've read the books, we've watched the films, we know all this stuff, we care about the lore. But we're not, I don't think, the majority of viewers or even potential viewers for a Rings of Power show. Rings of Power Season 1 didn't fail because, or just because, it did such a terrible job as an adaptation. It failed because it was tedious and badly written on its own terms, so even people with no familiarity with the lore had no reason to stick around, as I think only about 30% of them did. It's a bad show for all of the reasons. The lore breaks are pretty egregious, absolutely. But it's just a bad show as well because they have no ability to write a coherent script, and the actors are terrible, and the dialogue's embarrassing. And even if you did take it off in its own direction with no regard to the lore, that's not going to change unless you completely change the background team.
Well, I think the important thing is to establish a creative framework. So, for example, one of the reasons season one failed, whereas, for example, The Lord of the Rings by Jackson succeeded, is everyone knew what they were supposed to be doing. With Jackson's Lord of the Rings, his mission statement was quite simple. We just want to make it as accurate to the book as is cinematically possible, and we want to, make it for Tolkien. That's a very clear mission statement. It's a very clear creative framework that everyone can understand. Rings of Power is very confused. If you're involved in that production, you're not sure, is this supposed to be made into the books? Are we doing our own thing here? Everyone's kind of confused, and because there's no real creative framework there, you end up with just like an absolute mess. So for the writers, even down to the production, the costume designers, what exactly are they working off? I think before you do anything else, you first need to establish, are we working from the text here, or are we just doing our own thing? And everyone should know that so that they know exactly what they're supposed to do in the production.
I think even whether you're going to do your own thing or whether you're going to be slavishly devoted to the text as much as you can be, there's a general level of just basic quality that you would strive for, whether it's like something as simple as the costume design and actually making it seem like they're wearing real suits of armor, or the writing of the characters, giving them dialogue that real, like, believable humans or whatever would actually say, or giving you a plot that unfolds in a way that seems logically consistent and emotionally and dramatically satisfying. Those are all things that you can do regardless of whether or not you're going to stick to the lore. It's just a basic level of, like, quality, I suppose, and they don't even adhere to that. And this is a
to lead by saying we're going to write the story that Tolkien never could. Yeah, went well.
Yeah, and it just seemed natural that this show, which is about a fantasy world thousands of years before our own existence, should reflect the world that we live in today. Of course it should, yeah. Because
But also it's kind of a prequel to the Jackson films, meaning that all the diverse cast have to at some point be genocided between the end of Rings of Power and the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring.
yeah,
And that'll be fun to watch if they ever get around to that.
I mean, the Harfoots would definitely do it.
I would love to see the scene where the Harfoots just get wiped out. I would watch it just to see that.
But, like, they haven't created a show that people are really invested in. They create memes. That's all it is. It's like things that people like to hate on and mock because they're so dumb. That's what this show is. I mean, that's a hell of a legacy.
where do you go from? I mean, does it have any compelling characters or likable characters that you would like to see? Kind of use spring forward season two.
I was fully on board with Halbrand. I want him to win.
Honestly, Old Man Waldrick makes some more landmarks.
He turns the key in the floor to unlock the dam to release the water that's there around Doom. And just in case you missed it, they have the little sign in the top left corner. They've renamed the town. It's now officially called Mordor.
You'll make Minas Morgul. You can go over there and turn a key.
I just
want one of his adventures.
Galadriel just bragging about how she killed an ice troll in under 10 seconds. Constantly going on about it. I mean,
It's set up for failure anyway, though, because it is still an adaptation. Even if you do, as season one unofficially did, but as season two will also have to do, even if you do take it in a completely random direction that barely corresponds with anything that anyone's ever read before, it is still supposed to be an adaptation. They did spend $1 billion trying to get the rights to the appendices of the books. So they're using the character names, they're using the place names, they're using a number of recognizable things, which always would invite the comparison with the thing that they are adapting, or even the thing that they are spinning off from. You look at Rings of Power and you say, well, what is Galadriel's character arc versus the arc that you get in her chapters of the Silmarillion? You're always going to look at unfavorably upon the adaptation because they've done such a terrible job by comparison. It's never going to live up to it. It's always going to be a memeable entity for how shallow and cheap it is compared to the richness of the things that they've tried.
yeah. Well, you're missing the point here, soon, because the real selling point is we're going to have all female directors for every episode.
Good.
That's a sure mark of quality when you just pick people based on their arbitrary characteristics they were born with rather than their actual talent or abilities. So, yeah, sure.
Do they all have Tempest in them as well, or is that just reserved for Galadriel?
Only for 1 week per month do they have that Tempest in them.
You know, even if they do improve it, and I expect season 2 will be better than season 1 because it would be very difficult to make a season of television as bad as Rings of Power season 1 again. Just mathematically, that's unlikely.
Oh, so you underestimate them.
I mean, if they've fired the showrunners who are very inexperienced, and like you said, a lot of the show being shit does come down to just bad writing. For example, Galadriel's a very poorly written character. Here's a very basic one. This is like 8 hours of TV, and it has one battle that doesn't really make sense, fought over some shitty mud fillers that no one cares about. Like, that is astounding incompetence. How did that get greenlit? Like, you bring a script, a massive script, 8 hours long, into a studio executive, and he says, well, I see you've got a battle scene at the end of this. Yeah, let's greenlight that. Like, this is supposed to be like more fantasy. There should be a lot more in action and battles than that. So, from a very basic competence perspective, it's terrible. So of course, season 2 is going to be better. It would have to be better, because, especially if they've hired new showrunners. But even if it is better, it's still just going to be mediocre and kind of shit. You can only improve this so much because the foundation is so rotten. There's only so much you can do. There should be a lot more in action and battles than that. So,
I think, honestly, like, I love your optimism and I hope you're right, but you'd be surprised by how much further they can sink in terms of like their actual creative output, the artistic merit of what they produce. Particularly when you bring new people into a show which is already up and running and you're committed to a course of action narratively, and you're stuck with the actors essentially, but they're not going to get any better at what they do. And you've got your all-female directing team. Like, none of these things are really recommending themselves to the idea that this is going to be an improvement on season 1. I think you're just going to see more of the same, really, if not worse.
There's more risk as well because, at least, well, I would imagine this is what they will do. This one will actually front and center Sauron a lot more than season 1 did, with a lot more agency. He will effectively be the mastermind. He cast his Anatar form, Anatar the Gift Giver, who looks a bit like tech support Sauron from the casting decision, but, it was a choice. But he's the one who is supposed to trick the elves into, or try to trick the elves and all the Free Peoples into taking the Rings of Power. Which, if they do follow that storyline, and they cast the characters, so I imagine they will, that means that he's effectively got to mastermind all of the nefarious operations behind the scenes. So they have to write a really competent villain. And I've got Admiral Thrawn flashbacks already. I'm sure they'll turn him into a character like that.
I'll never forgive this show particularly for something that had $1 billion spent on it, apparently, how cheap it makes everything seem, how cheap it makes everything look. Like, the forging of the Rings of Power, this epic event in the history of Middle Earth, it made it look like it was done on a budget of like $100. It just looks so banal. It looks so small. It looks so uninteresting.
Was it $56 million per episode?
Yeah, but this is a world we live in where She-Hulk cost $25 million an episode. $25 million. It's incredible. But
Somehow it failed.
I mean, you know, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just everything about the show just doesn't lend itself to the kind of epic storytelling that you would expect from Tolkien. The Peter Jackson movies nailed it. They gave you that. They gave you that sense of grandeur. They gave you that sense of the entire world is at stake with what we're doing here. This is like world-changing events that we're witnessing. I never felt like that when I was watching Rings of Power. It felt like I was watching a soap opera.
Yeah, it was a. Go ahead.
Sorry, after you.
Well, I was going to say it did. It felt very small scale, dull, boring, and none of the events felt like they had any real weight or consequence to them. And then out of nowhere, a volcano explodes, and there's no real build up to that.
I'll always love that. It was just some random old guy with a sword. It's just triggered the volcano. Okay, sure.
Yeah, and that was another part of the bad writing. Like that wasn't properly set up. That's supposed to be a big payoff, and the reason it feels so abrupt is because it's not properly set up.
Yeah.
I think you would struggle to step that up in any way at all. I mean, the decision is such a bizarre one. How does Mordor get created? Yeah, old man floods volcano with key. Like, I don't think there's a way you can do that sensibly. I just think that was a terrible decision, and all the setup in the world would have struggled to make that seem serious.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. But then the other one on the scale question is a really interesting one because that's another huge missed opportunity. If you consider that, this is supposed to be set back in, it's the second age, I think, this is Rings of Power, or the equivalent of the second age. You get a snapshot of the grandeur and the might and the scale of the thing at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring. It's the great battle right at the start, which gives you a sense of how large these factions are and how well developed and how well armed and how big the battle and therefore the stakes are. The Rings of Power is set during a time when all of the factions are at their most powerful, in theory at least. Certainly the elves are supposed to be at their most powerful and the most widespread. They have the biggest civilizations, they have the biggest armies, they have the most knowledge, they have all of this. The dwarves are mining into Moria, they're expanding their civilization, and the men are pottering about doing fairly impressive things as well. But I think that the largest group of people you see in one place is going to be the horse charge toward the end of the show. Like 20 people on horseback going to fight about 50 orcs. And it gives you no sense of the grandeur of the world that you've built if that's the scale you've got.
Horse who died.
Yeah.
Yeah, Numenor sent 500 men in this military expedition to the mainland, and it's so pathetic.
And you've got characters like Isildur, who are major figures in the history of Middle Earth, and you've turned him into like a skinny, metrosexual teenage boy. Like, is this what you want to show us? Is this character that is supposed to like change the fate of Middle Earth? Really? That's all he is? I know why they did it, of course. Like they want to deconstruct him and show him that whatever he achieved was ultimately because of Guy Ladriel, like showing him the correct way to be a hero. But my God, it's demoralizing to see it happen.
And he shouldn't even be there for another, I think, the equivalent of 2,000 years.
Yes.
Isildur is born later. And so you can make a lot of law complaints, and I do make a lot of law complaints with Rings of Power. I understand, and will also make the criticism that it fails on terms which have nothing to do with its adaptation of the law. But law complaints are relevant because when your world is so carefully constructed, as Tolkien's world is, if you start changing bits willy-nilly, all of a sudden you find that further down the line, nothing you're adapting will make any more sense because you've broken the causal link and the chains that are supposed to create even something as simple as why is this tower where it happens to be? Chances are there's a story about that somewhere further back in the Silmarillion. And if you don't have that story, then the tower just randomly exists. That's one example. You need to actually have a mind to world building that is at least half as competent as Tolkien's to get close to creating this cohesive world. And Rings of Power showrunners are very far short of having half the level of competence of Tolkien.
One thing we can all guarantee is when the trailer does finally come out, well, we'll be watching with interest.
Oh yes.
Is this the worst TV program ever made? Because I know you guys are into it.
It's not the worst, but like again, it's in terms of relative destruction to like a beloved franchise. I guess you'd
It's
have to
pretty bad. Yeah.
judge it by. Yeah, it's pretty fucking bad.
Essentially, it's the bad reboot producers behind the first series, wasn't it? They're all
It's mu-
bad robots. J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
The two showrunners, they had an uncredited role on the Star Trek Beyond, the awful
Yeah.
one? I say one of the awful ones. So they are, they're all in some way connected to that shit show.
That's why there's so many mystery boxes in it. Bad Reboot loves their mystery boxes.
That's all they've been told to do.
It's genuinely, well, one, impressive, but two, like, just baffling that like these guys who have almost no thing are suddenly put in charge of like one of the most important shows of the current
And Lindsay
era of
Weber.
TV. Yeah, look, how did you get to this point? Like, there must be other people who are more qualified than this.
I would have thought it was
What's that?
It's who you know.
I mean, it could well be, yeah. It could be that.
It's who you know. It's not on talent. It's who you know. Like with most things, it's who you know. Being in the right place at the right time.
It could be that the studio wanted people who were inexperienced and therefore pliable, and they would just do what the studio demanded.
Perhaps they thought they couldn't fail.
Jennifer Salke obviously had a vision for it, and there were a lot of things that she wanted to see there, so she didn't want to bring in. She didn't want a George R.R. Martin showing up with all these big ideas, who's going to be very stubborn and insist that his creative vision be adhered to. She wanted, obviously, someone who was pliable, and it's astonishing that my God, man, like the Jennifer Salkes and Kathleen Kennedy's, the world that can get away with these billion-dollar fuck-ups and still not get fired. It is astonishing.
It's amazing.
It's impressive, yeah. It must be great to be a female executive in Hollywood. You can fuck up as many times as you want and have zero career repercussions.
And still complain about being impressed by the patriarchy.
Well, didn't work out for good old Patty Jenkins, though, did it?
Not her. It's worked okay for Kathleen Kennedy so far. Worked pretty well for Greta Gerwig. I mean, she hasn't had the box office failures, but yeah, still complain about being impressed when you're making millions of dollars. Sure. But should we do a few super chats? Since we're all here, we're still conscious right now, and there's questions waiting to be answered. They've been certainly piling up while we've been doing this. So, first one is from Canada Plus, who says, "Hail to the panel. Who would win in a fight? Guy Ladriel versus every character that Margot Robbie has ever played." So, the main one's going to be Harley Quinn, isn't it? Harley Quinn versus Galadriel. My money's on Galadriel.
Well, they won't let Harley Quinn die. So.
Yeah, but she isn't really a fighter, really. I guess if you're talking in terms of her combat abilities, probably Harley Quinn's the best one that she's done.
Barbie's the have to fight Galadriel.
Yeah, I think so. If she could take on an ice troll and kill it within 10 seconds, then she can take on...
Under 10 seconds. Under 10 seconds.
He also says, any excitement for the Razzies? Worst movie awards.
And the Marvels got snubbed. Yeah, the Marvels didn't get nominated in a single category.
Is that because it was so shit, even the Razzies wouldn't touch it?
It's outrageous, man.
What did they choose instead of the Marvels? I know there's been a lot of shit, like Indiana Jones and stuff, but
Expand.
up there.
Expand Forbles was in there.
Oh god, yeah, that was shit.
Oh, Shazam got in there.
Alright, I've got it. So they've got the Exorcist Believer, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, Shazam, Fury of the Gods. Of all the superhero movies, Expand Forbles and Meg 2 The Trench. That's their.
Do you think they put Shazam in there because it's like the least controversial one to put in there? Like nobody cares about
they wanted to. They wanted to have a superhero movie in there.
I never watched that and thought, oh my god, the performances are terrible here. It was more just like, yeah, the movie's just forgettable.
It was pretty bad plot-wise, but the